Okay. I'm going to speak today about some of my favorite energy medicine modalities with a particular slant on energy medicine devices. Now, why is this not moving along? Okay. So there are different types of energy that can be used in energy medicine, and here's a list. Visible light, and we usually call that phototherapy. Then there's the application of heat or infrared energy, for example, used in thermography. And infrared light is also very anti-inflammatory and boosts healing of wounds. It's was used a lot by NASA for the astronauts because they can't afford to get ill or sick or in pain for too long up there in the space shuttle. There's the application of electricity and also the reading of the electricity of the body, the natural electricity in the body, as you'll see. There's the application of both static as well as dynamic magnetic fields. What do I mean by that? By static magnets, I mean a simple, ordinary bar magnet, like the type you hang on your refrigerator. It never changes, it's always the same. A dynamical magnetic field is something made by a circuit, and it would be pulsing on and off, or at least alternating in some waveform. And that often has more biological effect than a static magnet because with static magnets, the body tends to get used to it. It accommodates to it and then it doesn't feel it. For example, there are various mattresses and comforters, sometimes with magnets sewn in them. And they may work for a month, and people say, oh, I had great sleep, I got rid of my pain. And then 45 days later, it doesn't work anymore. That's the problem with static magnets. But they're extremely good for an acute injury like my sprained ankle that I related to you in one of the course discussion sections, how I put a ring of magnets around my swollen ankle, and the swelling went down within a short time, and the pain with it. So it's a very good thing for acute injuries. And dynamic magnetic fields are more serious types of magnetic therapy. Then there are electromagnetic fields. These are neither electric nor magnetic, but radiant energies that we cannot see but have effects like extremely low frequency fields, like of the type of the brain wave or the heart waves, um, as well as high frequency fields like millimeter waves or gigahertz. Then there's sound therapies. Of course, there's music. There's hemisync, where you put binaural beats, different frequency in one ear and the other ear, and this drives the brain to the beat frequency. There's also sound below that of human hearing, below 20 waves per second. We can't hear it, but it has some biological effects. And above 20,000 waves per second, we call it ultrasound, and it also has biological effects. For example, ultrasound is used for, there's a transcranial therapy using ultrasound, which can penetrate deep into the brain. Then there's some unconventional fields. There are more and more devices based on so-called non-Hertzian or scalar waves. And these are somewhat controversial. None of them that I believe are FDA regulated or even come under the FDA auspices, but you'll see more and more consumer type products that say they work on scalar technology. And there may be other types of so-called unconventional fields that are not recognized yet by conventional science. And then, of course, there are the biofield therapies, the ones involving laying on of hands or putting hands within the biofield or sometimes operating across a distance. So let me speak first about biofield therapies, and the two most famous are Reiki and therapeutic touch. I'll just go over them quickly. Reiki, the word, is from the Japanese, meaning universal life energy. And of course, that goes along with indigenous thinking that there is an energy that permeates the universe that is the essence of life and that we can manipulate. We can use intention and movements to move that energy within us and also help others bring that energy to their bodies and help circulate it. It was a form of healing received and developed about 100 years ago by Mikao Usui, and there is an Usui lineage, therefore, people trained by him or by his masters under under him over many years. And it involves specific initiations, teachings, and the lineage of official masters. And as I think I told you in the course discussion, there are many people who say that they're doing Reiki, but they're doing unofficial Reiki, something maybe they learned overnight or in a short workshop. But this is the real Reiki. And unfortunately, that word has been used by many and it doesn't always mean the same thing. But the true Reiki does involve this lineage and specific initiations. It actually, if you go to Japan, they don't think of it so much as a biofield therapy as a spiritual practice. And you practice it on yourself and then also others, and it leads to a spiritual awakening. There's a sequence of 12 hand positions placed on the body of a client or patient or within the auric field on the head and body. So it doesn't have to involve touch, but it often does. People feel maybe more reassured when hands are touching them. But some people don't want to be touched, or they may have too much pain being touched, so there are options to place it nearby. The practitioner is regarded as merely a conduit for the energy that is an empty vessel. However, in my studies, I found that there were distinct practitioner effects, and it also depended on their state of health, because the idea of the Reiki is that it goes where it needs to go for the highest good. So if a practitioner is not in optimal health, the Reiki may first go to improve the health of the practitioner before it even affects the patient. And there's also distant as well as local Reiki. So it could be performed over a distance. It probably involves very different mechanisms when it's done over a distance. So I did a study, and I think I let you read that paper. I had Reiki practitioners come to the laboratory, and they treated patients, and then they laid hands on various boxes containing bacterial cultures for 15 minutes. And we did heat shock on the bacteria, and we saw that practitioners treating the bacteria, real Reiki masters, boosted the growth of heat shock bacteria over controls, which was a very lucky finding and very nice finding that it showed beyond a doubt that this is beyond a placebo effect. If there's an effect on cell cultures, then it must be beyond placebo because there's no belief involved on the part of cell cultures. So therapeutic touch is sort of was developed actually in the West by the theosophist Dora Kunz. Theosophy was a perennial philosophy and a kind of spirituality at around in the 19th century and early 20th century, and really gained ground in those years. And it resuscitated many ancient spiritual and healing practices. And Dora Kunz and a nurse named Dolores Krieger, who was a professor in New York, brought together the teachings of theosophy and reformulated this into therapeutic touch about 60, 70 years ago. And it was largely taught to nurses initially, and certainly especially on the East Coast because of their presence there and Dolores's presence within the nursing school. And so initially it was only for nurses. That's why Healing Touch started, because people outside of nursing wanted to do something similar. And so they created Healing Touch, which really is therapeutic touch for non-nurses. But today, anybody can do therapeutic touch. The organization, Therapeutic Touch International Association, certifies qualified TT practitioners and teachers. There is not a lineage, but there definitely is a certification process and definite classes that one takes from a certified teacher in order to become a bona fide TT practitioner and on this list. And it is a holistic, evidence-based therapy. There are lots of studies on therapeutic touch as there are on Reiki. And they also hold the concept of a universal life energy. They're utilizing both intention and compassionate use of this energy to promote well-being. And even though it has the word touch in it, it does not involve direct touch. Although one, I suppose, may accidentally touch a client or patient, but basically one places the hands in the biofield a couple of inches away from a client, and it involves assessment, well, first centering of the practitioner, then assessing the biofield of a client, applying the intervention, balancing the biofield, and finally evaluating the client and a closure process, kind of smoothing out the biofield. So it's conceptually different from Reiki, and I found it when I actually wanted to study therapeutic touch some years ago, but could not find enough practitioners in the West Coast. So I realized there was a concentration in Sacramento, California, but that was a little too far away, and they didn't want to travel. So I changed my study to study Reiki because it came via Japan and Hawaii. There was a higher concentration of practitioners of Reiki on the West Coast. I don't know how it is today. Perhaps there's a more uniform distribution of all of these therapies across the country. But those are the two most common biofield therapies that really have good research databases, evidence base for the clinical work. And of course, it relaxes, it helps with anxiety and mood issues and pain. So, now I want to turn our attention to devices. Now, actually, there are a number of well-accepted devices that have been part of medicine for a long time, like ECG, the electrocardiogram, which assesses the tachygram of the heart and the associated waves of heart activity. The EEG, or brain waves, electroencephalogram, which looks at brain function in various regions. And there's also magnetoencephalogram, which looks actually deeper into the brain because magnetic fields can penetrate further than electrical fields. So EEG is sort of like looking at the brain through wax paper, but the magnetic analog of that would be looking more deeply at brain function. Then there's GSR, or galvanic skin response, often used in biofeedback because it sort of goes up and down with one's emotional status. Although it doesn't tell us whether the emotions are positive or negative, it's reactive. When there's a little more sweat on the fingertips, then GSR goes up because there's more electrical conductivity on the fingertip. And it's useful for biofeedback in terms of settling down, making a lower value of GSR over time. Oximeters are used in hospitals. That's where they sort of clamp down to every patient to see how much of their hemoglobin is tied up with oxygen and delivering. And it should be over 95%, or there may be a problem. And with it, associated parameters, blood volume, pulse, and perfusion index. So these are ways of looking at the body energetically through waves, through the pulse wave. There's phototherapy for jaundice in newborns, and there's a lot of phototherapy that's been given for skin conditions, particularly ultraviolet. So these have been around a long time, and now we're going to turn attention to the less well-accepted energy devices or energy measures on the right-hand side here. So there's the simulators of the brain, both DC, which is steady current like from a battery, or AC, alternating current, like from the plug in the wall, the 60 hertz power, where we use cords. And these are both for medical as well as personal use. And I'm going to talk about an example later on. The real hallmark of energy medicine that put energy medicine on the map beyond these conventional things was bone healing devices. Because for non-healing fractures that are recalcitrant to heal, a pulsed magnetic field put outside and around the broken bone helps heal it. And that's an alternative to surgery and the implantation of steel plates or pins, which of course is very invasive, which orthopedic surgeons routinely did, and still did 20 years later, even after magnetic stimulator bone devices were available, because that's what they learned in school. So there's been quite a delay between the FDA approval of the bone stimulator and its acceptance and utilization in orthopedics. But I think that's changing. Thermography is not so well accepted, but many doctors have it because they can look directly at inflammation, for example, sports injuries, and follow how they heal. Mammograms instead of X-ray, thermograms of the breasts are being done, and often there are irregularities, and then instead of thinking about biopsies right away for cancer, women can change their diet, detox, and come back 4 to 6 weeks later for another breast thermogram, and often what was seen earlier has gone away. So this is a very non-invasive procedure because there's no radiation applied to the breast. It simply is looking at the heat from the breast and looking at the symmetry of the two breasts. Highly recommended. So then there's electromyography, looking at muscle tension, also used in biofeedback and especially with relaxation exercises. So, sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction here. Okay, let me talk about some specific devices now. First, using visible and infrared light. A device that I wouldn't go without is called, and this is a specific brand, a specific device, and even though I'm telling you about these brands, I don't get any, I have no relationship to these companies, and I am not getting any honorarium or any financial gain by telling you these brands, just so you know that. But these are devices that I've used specifically, so I know they work, and they've been helpful to my clients as well. There's a device called the Philips. Philips is a company out of Holland. They also make light bulbs. They make a lot of light medical devices, and this is one called Go Light Blue Light. It's an array of blue LEDs, and it's therapeutic. You look at it, you turn it on. You could be reading a newspaper and just having this blue light near your eyes, and it helps with seasonal affective disorder. So when the days get shorter, particularly in winter or as we move toward winter, people sometimes feel depressed. They can't get up anymore in the morning. Also with jet lag, using this in the morning in the new time zone can help reset your biological clock so that you'll be perkier all day and subsequent days in a new time zone. And just for people who feel the doldrums, lots of people don't get enough daylight, and the light in our homes is not that bright, even though it may seem bright. It's not as bright as sunlight, and consequently, I would say a lot of depression or maybe not clinical depression, but just not feeling optimum, maybe due to not enough strong light. So I highly recommend this device. It's a product you can purchase or your clients can get it. So it's a consumer wellness product. Another device in a whole system that I like that works with light is called syntonic optometry. Syntonics, actually, it's a very old word. It comes from treating the eyes with colored light. And for a long time, it was just for eye problems used by optometrists. But then they found out that it not only helps with certain eye problems, such as expanding the visual field, but it affects the autonomic nervous system. So if someone is too stressed, it can quell sympathetic overload and bring parasympathetic and sympathetic into balance. And besides, when you look at colored light through the eyes, as shown in this device here, and it doesn't have to be very bright, it irradiates the entire blood supply in about 20 minutes because the whole blood supply passes in the back of the eye over a period of 20 minutes. So you're actually not just irradiating your eyes, but you're irradiating blood cells like white blood cells, immune cells, and it can be doing a lot more than just for the eyes. So it's been recommended when it's pulsed. One can pulse it, for example, if you wanted to help with insomnia, you might pulse it at 4 hertz because that's the delta frequency of sleep. And use purple light because that's kind of soothing and dim, and that would help deal with insomnia. It also can help with ADHD and ADD, attention deficit disorders. If you would shine yellow light and blink it, say, at 15 hertz, then you would help bring about those brain waves that are involved with concentration and focus. So it's an alternative to drugs, as all of energy medicine is. And one can buy consumer versions of these, although I actually have some more of the old-fashioned optometry devices, but they're very, very effective. So, infrared devices, there's a picture of a woman getting a breast thermogram, and there you see one breast is a little redness, but that's very good for assessing blood flow in the body, for looking at regions of inflammation, for monitoring sports injuries and how they're healing. And there's another side of this where they use infrared therapy in particular from light-emitting diodes, those little tiny lamps that are now entering our homes and street lighting because they're very bright and very small and they don't take much power. But infrared therapy is extremely good for pain, wound healing. It's anti-inflammatory. And there are even infrared wands for skin and cosmetic use because they enhance collagen production in the skin, which then helps prevent wrinkles. So it has many uses for pain, wound healing, stimulating, making faster healing of wounds and sprains. The infrared penetrates more deeply than red LEDs, but sometimes you get in a device a mixture of red and infrared LEDs because if you just turned it on and it was all infrared, you could not tell if it were on or off because our eyes do not see infrared. So they often put a few infrared and red LEDs together as shown in these couple of devices here so you know when you turn it on. And they have a type for back pain that surrounds the whole lower back. So let's talk now about some electricity type devices. One of the most common ones involves measuring the electrical conductivity of acupuncture meridians, or actually of specific acupuncture points. So in this case, the client or patient holds a rod which is ground with one hand, and with the other hand you take this probe, as shown by this practitioner here, and you go around and you place it on key source points of the acupuncture meridians, and these are typically on the hands, wrists, ankles, and feet. I have such a device. The device I'm using, however, has been discontinued. It's called the EMOS, and it was out of Taiwan, but it's no longer being sold. But there's devices such as the Biomeridian device is an American one. Vega is a German one. There are many of these. And sometimes this is called electrodermal assessment. Sometimes it's called EAV, electroacupuncture, according to Voll, V-O-L-L, who was a German doctor about 60, 70 years ago who actually invented this procedure and combined it with homeopathy. He was doing stress testing and then bringing a homeopathic near a patient to see if that would balance their meridians, if that would improve the electrical flow through the meridian. And that's how the German school began to use this kind of meridian testing. So EAV is usually of the German school. Then there are the Japanese devices and the Chinese devices, which are a little more closer to the real Oriental medicine. But looking at how electricity then flows through a specific meridian is directly related to how energy, how the qi flows through the specific meridian. So we don't think electricity is necessarily qi, but this shows whether that meridian is open and flowing or not. And generally there's a software that comes with these devices that then tells you about all kinds of things regarding the patient yin-yang balance, whether there are blockages along a specific meridian, whether it's excess electricity or insufficient flows of energy along those meridians. And it can even tell you then which acupuncture points to treat. And even if you're not an acupuncturist, you could do acupressure, which does not require a license. It's not breaking the skin in any way. So, and some of these devices also treat the body. In some cases, they have a form of electronic homeopathy built into them. So you get a picture of what's the imbalance is, and then the software pops up with the treatment plan, which may not be necessarily sugar pills of homeopathy, but electronic versions of it, whereby the frequencies of homeopathic remedies are stored in these machines and then delivered to the body. So they're combination then diagnostic and therapeutic devices. And usually people get pretty involved with these machines. Practitioners either love them or they hate them. They either make a whole practice out of them in general, or they give them up because they find they're pretty complicated to run. So here's a pattern of how electrical conductivity looks around acupuncture points. It's sort of like, imagine the acupuncture point is at the pinnacle of a mountain, and then these are contour patterns. So acupuncture points are the highest points on the skin of electrical conductivity. They're portals into these channels of chi that flow and that are part of the biofield inside our bodies. So another device that I really like is transcranial electrostimulation. There's also transcranial magnetic stimulation and transcranial ultrasound stimulation. But one of the simplest devices on the market for which you, as licensed American healthcare workers, you could procure these. You could use them in the clinic. You could also sell them to patients or rent them out if you have a licensed psychology degree, I believe, in most states. And it does direct brain stimulation, generally through the earlobes or across the cranium, across the temples with different style of electrodes. And it's a handheld device you could slip in your pocket. It looks sort of like an iPod or something. And it's for acute, chronic, all types of pain, post-traumatic, for mood disorders, anxiety, depression, and insomnia. It's an FDA-cleared device. 510K means it's kind of grandfathered. There are other devices that came before it. And I think it's phenomenal. It also has another configuration where you can use it not just on the brain, but directly on a position of pain in the body using a wand. So, and this is not too expensive a device. I don't know these prices offhand. My devices were purchased many years ago, and I know prices have changed. Here's another remarkable device, or two devices based on PEMF. PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Field devices. This is now beginning to enter the mainstream practically. There are a lot of consumer products that are doing this, that people are going out and purchasing. These are two that I recommend, and they're not very expensive. I believe they're under $300 each. And these would be consumer products that are perfectly legal. They deliver a pulsed magnetic field, and as I said earlier, magnetic fields can penetrate the body very deeply, unlike electric fields, and so it can work at a deep level. If pain is deep within, this can be very helpful. And PEMF promotes cell repair, speeds healing of injuries, it's good for pain, and it in general is anti-inflammatory. And these are just battery-operated devices, sometimes with AC adapters that can recharge them. And they come with instructions, etc. So, EM Pulsar and a mat called EM Pulse Pad are two such devices. I talked about BioWell some time ago, and this device is for biofield assessment, whereby you look at the corona discharge around each fingertip. I'll answer your question, Kathy, at the end. We'll see that. So basically, we're measuring or assessing the biofield, and the goodness of this is that you can look at a patient or client before and after an intervention and see whether your intervention has improved the biofield. And you know if you improve the biofield that you're going to move the person toward self-healing, because the flesh and blood will follow if they hold a new pattern. And they may have to come in 12 times for your particular intervention until the pattern is held. For example, back pain, the first treatment in acupuncture often doesn't do anything for back pain, but the 12th treatment, there's a total remission, according to the literature. So this may follow the progress of how acupuncture may improve the patient or other therapies that you do. And this is a good device for both the clinic, research, and self-assessment. There is also a therapeutic sister device to this called BioCore, which delivers music plus gigahertz waves to the brain or some other parts of the body. And you can read more about that at bio-well.com and bio-well.eu, which stands for European Union. And I think I already spoke about how you can assess stress, overall energy or chi, right-left balance of the biofield, and the balance of organs, of the various organs and tissues. And you can show energy distribution before and after interventions and look for improvements, as here we had an improvement with emotional freedom technique. So, with the biofield, one can also look at how stress affects clients. A lot of people have stress from electropollution from their own little devices, from Wi-Fi modems, from smart meters, from cell phones and tablets, and these watches that also deliver RF that are hooked to the internet. I won't mention any brands, and I think you know what I mean. The kind of watches you talk into and that monitor you and are right on the wrist, right on a key meridian, going up the left arm toward the heart. Not a good thing. So here's an example of someone who looked great when she came in, and she told me she just feels terrible working at her computer. And so I had her bring her laptop computer. She worked at it for an hour, and this is how her biofield looked. It totally shrunk and was quite disheveled. So it showed this person has electro-hypersensitivity, and then I went about working with her toward a solution for that problem. So now there's a whole field that's coming up. This is really the future of energy medicine devices and biosensing, and it's about emerging wearable technology and personal health monitoring. This is what's cooking, what's happening in Silicon Valley, here where I am. There's a lot of interest and money in this, and devices are emerging. Not all of them are well studied yet, but it's kind of exciting. And on the other hand, how safe is it? There are issues. Many of them involve a computer interface deployed in the cloud that's mediated by their own cell phones or Wi-Fi, and so they have to have their cell phone near their body all the time, which is playing with fire, in my opinion, because of the microwave effect. People are measuring brain waves, heart rate, skin potential, skin conductance, skin temperature, blood flow, blood pressure, muscle tension, and breathing itself. And it's been called the quantified self by means of these devices. They're also delivering therapies. So here's some examples of these wearables. There's a dry wearable EEG. That means you don't have to wet the electrodes. You just plop this cap on your head, and you can move around amazingly, because there's been a lot of movement artifacts with EEG in the past, but they claim they can filter it out. I haven't tried that myself, and these things are so novel. I can't tell you whether they're good or bad, but I do want to make you aware that this is the future and this is what's happening. There are the smart wristbands like Fitbit and many other brands now assessing movement, how many steps you took, level of exercise. That's useful. There are smart socks that sense the pressure of your foot in the shoe and whether you're walking right. Might be very helpful for retraining pronated feet and other foot maladies, and assessing gait, and smart watches that even measure your blood pressure. So here are some more. One is called Think, and it isn't always worn there at the head. Another one called Focus, and Leaf. And I'm going to show you. Leaf is kind of looking at breath there, and Focus is placed on the head. And some of these, the younger generation is really excited about these. I've been to meetings of upwards of 1,000 persons here in Silicon Valley, and most of them are under 40. This is where the younger generation is putting a lot of their attention and interest. Many of these companies are run by younger generations who are the inventors and CEOs. Here are those three wearables that I just showed you that stimulate or provide biofeedback. Think gives low-level electrical stimulation of nerves on the head or neck, so it isn't always placed on the forehead. It could be on the back of the neck. Sometimes on the vagus nerve. It's used to promote relaxation and also for sleep. Folk.us is an electrical brain stimulator. It's not so much for mood disorders, etc., but they're using it for sports such as running. It seems to promote lucid dreaming. It helps with focus and other conditions, and they're still looking at what else it can do that's non-medical. Leaf is for deepening the physiological knowledge of the client because it records a lot of parameters, including the breath rate. It trains the body to fight stress. It looks and trains heart coherence, the heart waves, for example, as done by HeartMath. HeartMath is a company in Boulder Creek, California, that looks for coherent waves coming from the heart. And I think I told you in earlier lectures that the more coherent the physiology, the healthier the person, the greater ease there is in doing everything in daily life when everything is humming along, kind of like a well-tuned car. A well-tuned machine, everything's working coherently and not incoherently where the car might get shaky. So those are some examples then of wearables that stimulate and provide biofeedback. So some of them are assessment and some of them are stimulating and also giving feedback directly when one is out in the field. So people are taking these wearables and they're going through ordinary life wearing these things. These are not just worn in sleep time. They're worn during active movement, and that's brand new. There are even clothes that are assessing. I saw some clothes that at a conference that were delivering electricity because they had silver threads in them. They were delivering a little bit low current to stimulate the meridians to better conduct. And sports people thought they might get better performance. That's not clear yet, but that's what's coming. That's the next generation. So that's it. And I'm going to turn back your mics. If you would unmute yourself, we can have discussion. Um,
The Apple Watches, do those present the same risks as an iPhone?
I'm not sure on that, and I haven't found anyone with an Apple Watch to be able to measure that. Recently I measured a Google Watch, and it did it looked a little less than the Android in terms of the field. The Android is the lowest emitting cell phone, and the iPhones are much higher emitting. And the larger the iPhone, the way I've been measuring them over time, the greater the microwave emission. So these watches are tinier than phones, and they tend to emit less. But I haven't found anyone with an Apple Watch.
Got it. Thank you.
What about like Fitbits and things like that?
Well, I only know the old Fitbit. The old Fitbit, I have one, was something that you download, but it only operated on a battery. And so that was not an active communicator with a cell phone. If anything is actively communicating to your cell phone or to your tablet or computer, then it is emitting microwaves. And that, in my view, should not be worn all day. So I only know the old Fitbit, and I haven't really looked at the new ones. But more and more of them are going for this connection to the cloud and to be downloadable in that way and not just through a memory stick or something.
So Beverly, let me ask you a question. This is Kathy. If people wear the Fitbit, would you recommend that they only do it during the activity time and then take it off?
Well, especially if it's if it's an active emitter that's download or uploading to the cloud or to their own cell phone. If it has radiation like that, and I think the new ones do, then I wouldn't wear that thing all day. You're wearing it over the Sanjiao and pericardium meridian on the left wrist. That I haven't measured what that does to the acupuncture meridians, but I'd be concerned about it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, but we don't know the long-term effects of that. Remember, we're like guinea pigs with all of these technologies, and then people have a cell phone. They have to keep it in their pocket to make the thing work. Any cell phone that close to the body, if you had a chance to scan my paper on cell phone radiation and blood, it did not make the blood look good. That was an optional.
Yeah, that's why I was asking that.
Yeah, but it made the blood sticky, the red blood cells sticky, and then made them spiky like a sea urchin. Now, the sticky red blood cells puts people at cardiovascular risk for heart attack and stroke, particularly the older generation. So, since that's the number one health problem is cardiovascular disease, I'd be very reluctant to recommend those things full time to my clients.
Yeah, so I had the question about the PEMF devices. Would they be good for people that suffer from hypertension? Like wearing the pendants or a bracelet or something?
Yeah, It's not clear to me that they have been shown to relieve hypertension. Um, I mean, the best thing for hypertension that's holistic is to exercise daily, rigorously,
Yeah.
like cardiovascular,
Yes.
because for 24 hours there's a hypertension lowering effect as a result of, say, 45 minutes of good aerobic exercise, which could be brisk walking. It doesn't have to be running or
Yes.
playing tennis. So I think that's a tough one. We don't have a good answer to hypertension. We do have Respirate, a device. Let me spell that for you.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that device.
Resperate, respirate.com. It's spelled a little different than respirate. Respirate.com
Yeah.
is an FDA-approved medical device that helps you pace your breathing and it slows you down to yogic breathing. And when you do that for 20 minutes, you lower your blood pressure. So it's showing you that your hyperventilation of this 12 to 15 breaths a minute that many people breathe is causing or one of the factors behind hypertension. And if we slow our breathing to a yogic breathing type, 6 to 8 breaths, slow breaths, deep breaths a minute, then hypertension goes bye-bye and we don't need drugs. How's that for an answer? And this device
Yeah,
called
I found
Respirate.
that interesting. Yeah, I have an older client that I do paced breathing with, and then I put the cuff on with his blood pressure, and he can get, at one time he'll have 187 over 90, and when we do that, he can get it down to 128 over 78.
Oh, wow. That's something you need to consistently do, however. If you say, well, I'm normal now and I'm going to stop using it, the hypertension comes back, unless you are truly in the
Yeah,
zone.
exactly.
So you have to stick with it.
Yes.
Now I realize I missed one slide. I'm going to open it up and show you because I thought about the risk-benefit ratios of these wearables, and I just wanted to point these out to you because I think there's a lot of useful information that we can all gain about ourselves that we could never gain before. That's great. And also our healthcare professionals can learn more about us, about our physiology and our behavior, so that some of them will be hooked up to your or downloadable by your healthcare professional so that they can follow you in the field when you're more normal than when you go for a healthcare exam, because you may have white coat hypertension. You know, every time you're measured by a nurse in a medical office, it looks high. What's it doing in the field when you're in your normal life? That would be useful to know. So that's the kind of thing we can
Yeah.
learn. But there are potential hazards from the electromagnetic fields emitted by these devices. The other downside I found is that talking to people who use them a lot, that the wearer can get competitive with himself or herself. They may say, well, you know, I did this in 6.5 minutes yesterday. I want to go to 6 minutes today. And when people start having this type A behavior, they may thwart any relaxation effect and get into hyper sympathetic drive in their nervous systems, which is not good. Now, I want to say what some of the leaders of the consciousness hackers movement, they call themselves consciousness hackers. And by that, they mean something good. They are actually trying to, with these technological devices, they believe that it may be a shortcut to psycho-spiritual development. Now, where have we heard this before? Now, most of you are much younger than me, but I can tell you that during the 60s, my generation thought that taking psychedelic drugs would lead them to a shortcut to psychospiritual development and even enlightenment. And this is where the young generation, many of them, believe that using these devices and um, they're going to meditate better, faster, and get in the zone, and that it will speed up their psychospiritual development. That remains to be seen. I'm not optimistic about that. But I do think when some of them say it may help a person select the best form of meditation. You know, there are a lot of types of meditation out there. Some of them promote gamma waves in the brain, others coherent alpha in the brain. And one size does not fit all. There may be a form of meditation that is best for you, but you may not figure that out until you've tried 5 or 6 types on your own and then arrived at the one you like. But what if this kind of feedback and assessment could help you select the best meditation for your physiology? I think that would be really great. And so I do see that they are cutting edge, and they may give us helpful information that may help us choose the best methods of relaxing and of psychospiritual engagement. So we can go back to looking at each other. I'm going back to the webcam if you want to turn on your screen. No, you don't want to. Okay. Uh, there we go. Great. So anyway, I'm excited about the wearables. They're usually inexpensive consumer products. Um, there's a lot of these in development. There's a lot of interest, a lot of money, and a lot of the younger generation are moving
So
into
the
this realm.
Respirate would be a good recommendation for people with hypertension.
Yes, Respirate is well proven, and by the way, it's even Medicare reimbursed, and it might be HMO reimbursed as well under Obamacare. But it's a prescription item. However, I think you can buy it, but if you want it, the reimbursement, then I think you need a doctor's prescription, and then you can go through that process of recovering your expenditure. So is it exciting? What do you think of the world of devices? I've just given you a few, but there's a lot of devices out there. These are some of the common ones and the upcoming wearables. And the military is really into this. So I know that there's a lot of military research and application, and then spin-offs from the military, simpler versions for lay people to use, and that gives information. So I can imagine applications for the elderly to know how they're doing. There are already some out there, and even video cameras on the elderly, but adding more that will assess them and keep their loved ones aware of what's going on with grandma and granddad is not a bad thing, as long as it's not invasive and not broadcasting 24/7 frequencies.
I'm wondering if location affects any of the outcomes. Like, if you're in what's considered a religiously sacred place, does the outcome change?
The outcome of what in
Like the
particular?
measurements that are being read?
I don't know. I've never studied people in those places and how they may differ, but that's a good research project. That could be a dissertation, for example.
Yeah.
I'm getting excited about the solar eclipse coming. August 21st, are you aware that we have a total solar eclipse sweeping across the United States from Central Oregon to the Carolinas? And I'm taking equipment up. Central Oregon is the closest point for me. So we're driving up there with equipment, and I know that the dowsing response changes during total solar eclipse from the literature. So something happens to the human energy field during a solar eclipse. You may not be able to go to the total eclipse region, but you could do some assessment even if you're in a partial eclipse region. That could be interesting. So animal behavior changes. I've been to once a total solar eclipse in the Caribbean. I think it was 1997. And I remember it became dusk and beautiful sunset all the way around because it happened at noon, so the sun was overhead. And then when the total solar eclipse was there, the entire horizon was colorful like the sundown all around. And then the birds tweeted and crickets chirped for a while it was dark. And then as the light came back again, they stopped. And we had a big party. So that's what people do at the eclipse. It's a lot of fun. But I'm really interested in what is going on to subtle energy in the human energy field during the total solar eclipse. It's a fantastic opportunity. And it's a short period of time. It may be 10 minutes. It depends where you are along between the Oregon and the Carolinas. It's shorter in the West Coast and gets longer as you go east. And it's a different time of day. So
I'm really interested in seeing how it affects even just that not in the direct path or even too far from it, because in Utah there isn't any space where it's going to have it. But I still feel like it's going to affect things because this is a big energy thing that's happening. And so I'm going to be very interested to see how I feel that day period and
Yes.
question others.
I would keep a journal about how you feel, even if you're not outside, and don't look at it with naked eyes. That's dangerous. But there are various visors you can buy cheap for $1 or so you can look up at whatever partial eclipse you may get. But I think it would be very worthwhile journaling and asking others about it. So it's an exciting time, and Native people thought it was quite ominous. It was not a good thing to have a solar eclipse in your vicinity, and that may be superstitious, but maybe they knew something else. So.
It'll be really interesting to see.
Oh, and also, here's an interesting thing. Pendula, they move like this. And I'm not talking about the little ones that you work with in dowsing, but those giant pendula at the museums that go back and forth and that tell time. They knock down a peg. And because the Earth is turning, they also make a small turn over 24 hours. Now, during a total solar eclipse, those large pendula in the museums suddenly deviate 14 degrees. That's huge. Normally they deviate just a fraction of a degree over minutes, but suddenly they're going to twist. So there's something strange going on about gravity. That's what it tells me. And we don't understand that scientifically. I looked deeply into that to try to understand it, but there's no scientific understanding of that. So a fun thing to play with coming up next month.
Yeah.
If any of you do have interesting experiences, I encourage you to email me, brubik@saybrook.edu, because I'd like to know about what happened. I'm going to be making a report on some of this as a research project. So anything interesting, of course, is beyond our course, which will be stopped by then. So do email me through Saybrook, and I'll email you back. So great. So any other points for discussion?
I feel like I have so many questions. So what's your take on the technology that measures the energy in the meridians, the ones that you were talking about that either a provider was totally up for it or not at all? Like, what's your take on it personally? Do you use it? Do you like
Yes,
it?
I do. I use something called the EMAS, EMAS, but it's from Taiwan and it's been discontinued, but mine works fine, so I still use it, and I've had it for 20 years. And they withdrew from the United States market, so there's nothing left in English to upgrade. But I love it. It really gives me a picture of all 12 meridians, 20 meridians in the body, and it gives a complete profile, a fabulous PDF report that I hand my client that indicates what points to do acupressure on. And I'm not an acupuncturist or anything. I'm not doing needling or anything, but it tells them what points they could press on, where the points are found, even diet appropriate, and it's another measure of autonomic balance. So it's really I think it's fantastic, but my system was very easy to use. Some of them are quite complex, um, and so you can get pretty tied up learning how to use it, and then it becomes your world of how you view patients. That's what I've seen in terms of a lot of practitioners. They make it their entire lens through which they view a patient because it took them so long to get there, and then they find it so rich giving them information, and then they find out how to give therapies through it, electronic homeopathy and related things. Or they have a patient hold in one hand a homeopathic remedy or some nutritional supplement, and then they retest and they find out that was the right remedy for them, and then the patient goes home with those remedies, whether it's herbs or supplements or homeopathy. So
Got it.
many people practice using it, and it's they swear by it. And there's a lot of patients that have said, nobody could figure out what was wrong with me until I went to the EAV practitioner who said, yes, I've got an infection deep in the socket. It was painless because it was so chronic, but that was the source of all their health problems, and it took EAV practitioner to find it. And some of these devices include an element of the operator dependency. In other words, the operator becomes part of the loop. So that they operate a little bit unconventionally other than an independent electrical circuit. I've seen things that I scratched my head. I said, this doesn't make any sense. And initially I threw out from my worldview, I said, these devices don't look good to me because they're not based on conventional science principles. And then I discovered that they really do work because of the biofield. The biofield is nearby the device, and the device then is assessing the biofield at large, not necessarily always connected to the patient in a circuit way. So they have a lot of utility, but be prepared for a learning curve.
Thank you.
Now I see we have one more caller online. Caller 01. You identify yourself?
Yeah, it's me. It's Kathy. I lost my connection.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. All right. I just thought you might be one of those that needs points. You're fine. You don't need points.
Yeah, my internet dropped out. I think it's a little warm here today, so I'm having some internet problems.
Right. Okay.
So I had a question, just a quick question for you about my paper.
Okay.
About I'm doing it on acupuncture and distant healing.
Ah.
Does that seem too different to you?
That is pretty different. There will be papers on that, but distant healing, by the way, it's much less effective than local healing from the literature. That being present with the healer locally in the same room has a stronger effect than this distant healing stuff across the miles. And I'm not sure why, but I just think, yeah, I mean, those are pretty dissimilar. You may want to rethink that. For example, you could compare, needling with some of these electrical methods like the EAV, the electroacupuncture cognitive volt, the devices we were just
That's funny you say that.
Yeah. That evaluates meridians.
After you just talked. Yeah.
That would be an interesting comparison. There's a literature on both, and they're not too dissimilar, but they're dissimilar enough. And you'll learn a lot about the meridian system doing that, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when I was just listening to you speak to the other question, I was thinking maybe I should switch it to that. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay. And there's a lot of those transcranial stimulators. There's ultrasound, there's electricity, there's magnetism. Comparing different ones could make a good paper. The electrical one has been around the longest, the magnetic the second longest. The ultrasound, I'm not sure there's a big literature on that. Not sure how many papers you find on that. But those are two. The electrical and the magnetic transcranial stimulators could be a comparison paper.
Yes, exactly. Okay, perfect.
So I gave you a little tour of what's going on in the devices. The bone healing device, that's not something you therapists, I thought, would use. But that's, the orthopedist surgeons should be really relying on those when they have these bones broken in many places or bones that are recalcitrant to heal when they're broken. But it even speeds up the healing of just an ordinary fracture. So if you get a broken bone, you might want to ask for it.
Do they, this is Lisa, do they use that, or why don't they use that with the elderly, who have, a hard time healing?
They should be, but here's the problem. They're made by small companies that don't have the marketing muscle of large companies. And doctors largely get their medical education from sales representatives, from pharmaceutical representatives and other large companies. And these smaller companies don't have the marketing muscle to send representatives out to physicians at large. So unless the doctor is going to continuing medical education where they deliberately learn about alternative and complementary medicine, it will just never be part of their worldview. That's very sad. But they've been FDA approved for 35 years. It's a long time. But they haven't reached the medical education. It was about 20 years ago, I wrote a curriculum for energy medicine for the American Medical Students Association, AMSA, AMSA. They asked me to write a medical curriculum for energy medicine, and it's on the web. You can find it. And has it been much utilized over 20 years? No. You know why? Because the medical schools say their curriculum is full, and they have no space for any more new courses. That's been the response. Okay? So it isn't like we didn't try. I provided a curricula. I had an NIH grant to do that. And it's out there. It's online. You can find it. And it's like this course, but expanded. And unfortunately, it has not penetrated the medical schools that much, despite the fact that the American medical students were the ones that wanted it in the first place. They're not getting it. But they might get a continuing medical education version of it once they're bona fide MDs. Because if they want it, then they'll realize they're going to have to get continuing medical education units, which doctors have to get every year, by going to an alternative medicine provider who's giving a course like that, and not just the conventional one. But that's up to the physician to do. So you can see that medicine is limping along, and that's one reason this stuff is not being taught in the medical schools yet. Because they're still teaching, the memorization of anatomy and physiology. I mean, I don't see why a doctor needs to memorize anatomy anymore. They can always look it up on the internet. In the old days, yeah, they needed to know that. It wasn't so quick to pull out a medical textbook and look it up, but a doctor can, in seconds, if they forgot something, they could find it. So I think they really need to de-emphasize some of the older educational modules and bring in the new. That was my hope, but that hasn't happened as fast as we had hoped, at least for energy medicine. But we can only do so much and to try to change the system. I think our best bet, as we have discussed, is grassroots. Changing lives, one life at a time, through your clients, through public education, because then people are going to demand more modalities that are gentler and softer, like energy medicine. And the devices are also safe and non-harmful. It's not electroshock therapy or anything like that. That was old style energy medicine where they shocked. If someone was utterly depressed and didn't respond to any therapy, then they gave them shock treatment of the brain. And there are the paddles to start the heart. Now, those are really radical forms of so-called energy medicine. But today, there are softer, gentler therapies that are at the level of the biofield frequencies. Very, very gentle. They do not have side effects. They gently coax the biofield in a new direction and therefore jumpstart self-healing. That's how they work. So they're not doing drastic things. And we really need to get these into medicine. So it's my hat's off to you, because that's your challenge as you go into the field to do your great work, to bring these modalities to the grassroots and to create more opportunity for energy medicine to flourish and give people choices in their health care. So even as the Republicans deliberate a new health care plan, I don't expect that evidence-based medicine like energy medicine is going to get in there. Believe me, I have tried. I worked for 25 years, and I know others who tried with the Obamacare, and we just couldn't get it in there. There's just too many big lobbyists from big industry who don't want it. And if energy medicine got in there and it could do so much, it would really challenge the profits of big pharmaceutical industry. And I think that's one of the reasons that they deliberately exclude us. They have seen that they know that it's efficacious and would replace a lot of those drugs. If all these little energetic things can deal with mood disorders, insomnia, I mean, that's a big part of the market, as you know, of drug market. So imagine if we could help people heal themselves and coax the biofield in a direction where nobody's depressed anymore. And insomnia is not a problem. And anxiety is taken care of. And they don't need drugs because they've done mind-body work and energy modalities. that's where things are headed, but it's going to take you folks to bring it to the mainstream. Because I don't see it changing fast from the top down. It's got to change from the grassroots upward. So my hat's off to you. Go do the great work and bring this stuff to the people. Okay?
That we're trying.
Yes. Yes. Our hope is in you and your
Perfect.
clients and the education you will bring out in the future. So, and you can be part of continuing medical education. I can imagine some of you who become well-known practitioners and or researchers in the field will be asked to give continuing medical education. I even gave a course to the American Psychiatric Association. But I'm sorry to say, hardly anybody came. There were thousands of psychiatrists who came to the meeting, and we probably had about 50 of them in our course on neurofeedback.
Wow.
And the rest of them are writing prescriptions because that's what psychiatrists do. And that's very sad that they don't know the alternatives for a lot of those maladies that they're writing prescriptions for. That would be really training brain waves to move in a new direction permanently so that those patients would never need psychiatric drugs. So, anyway, that's what we're up against. I can continue to rant, but I'll let you go. Unless you have further questions.
Thank you.
I really
Thank you
enjoyed
so
meeting
much.
you folks, and I'm going to get your papers back to you shortly so you got some feedback from me before you finish the big paper. So you can expect that. If I have any trouble downloading them, I'll be in touch with you via email. I haven't downloaded all of them yet, but somehow the course is funny like that. Sometimes I can't get them. I don't know why. So, okay. Well, good luck to you all. And again, it's been my pleasure, and I look forward to receiving your final paper and finishing reading your practice papers.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Good night.
night.